That must mean it's time to go. Hello, everybody. This is Curtis. We're live on this channel. Like, this is actually live. It's been a long time since we went live on Off the Left Eye. In the studio, it's Curtis and Karin Childs. We got some special guests with us. I'm going to introduce them in just a second, but I just want to say the show is called Trying to Get Closer to God. Look for these signs. And that's not just like, we're not going to give you generic stuff. We're going to give you a lot of details. So to do that, I'm really happy to have with us Todd Beiswinger of Lord, I'm Trying, and Howard Thompson of Spiritual Shorts, two awesome Swedenborgian YouTube channels. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for hanging out.
Hey, thanks for having us. And Howard, you need to unmute yourself. But yeah, it's it's super good to be here.
A lot of people at home are like, it's not really live. They tape this, but this is live. You can tell. Howard, what's up?
Happy to be here, Curtis. Thanks for having us on.
Sure.
Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So I feel like let's go right into what it's like. And when I first had proposed this topic, I mean, we picked it out of a list that our team got, and I said it to you, and you were going to do the research. And you're like, how are you going to? What are the signs getting? It's so broad. But once we talk about like what are the symptoms? Like what do you experience when God gets closer? We're going to do like sort of 5 mini conversations about these different ways in which God's approach affects you, because it's a complex interaction. If you're watching from home, you get in the chat. If you write some comment about this, we'll react to it. We'll put it up on the screen here. We want to know your thoughts about what's it been like for you getting closer to God or farther away from God. So this is the first thing I want to talk about is how Swedenborg asserts that getting closer to God is a two-way process. And this is the first quote from True Christianity, number 89. It is a law of the divine design that the closer and closer we come to God, which is something we have to do as if we were completely on our own, the closer and closer God comes to us. When we meet, God forms a partnership with us.
I love that. That's really introducing that this is a partner. This really is a partnership that God wants. God doesn't want to just do it to us, like drag us closer to him. This is the whole free will thing. Like it's not real unless we consent to it, right? And it's just a wonderful thing. And I also like thinking about something Swedenborg talks about, which is also in the Bible, that there's a way that God's always present with us, always closer than we are to ourselves in our innermost core. But there's our more, free will consciousness that needs to choose to get rid of what's in between us and God and move closer in that way. So it's both like God is present with everyone in one way, but there's a conscious way that we need to partner with God that we get to choose if we want to engage or not.
Well, yeah, it's like if God's hanging around, but we're not friends, it's not a partnership in the same sort of way. Yeah, Howard and Todd, how does that strike you? I mean, there's a lot of like Swedenborgian particulars in there, the completely on our own, that kind of stuff. What does this mean to you when you hear it?
I mean, to me, yeah, once you get past the Swedenborgies, it sounds kind of common sense. It's like, Curtis, you and I are going to hang out if I put the effort into calling you once in a while and you call me once in a while. But if it's always me calling you and you don't reciprocate, I'm gonna stop at some point and say, I guess Curtis doesn't really want to hang out with me. I'm gonna let it go.
I was sorry, okay? You don't have to bring it up on this show. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yep. And if God is we are human because God is, right? So the way that human dynamics work, like you mentioned, tells us something about the way that we have a relationship with God. Of course, yeah.
Right. I like what you say, because God is, and the Bible says that God is love. And what does that mean? Humans have some pretty crazy ideas about what love is, but the reality is God wants to enter into a partnership with us, and it's a loving partnership. And if you think about it, nobody can be forced to love another. It's a true partnership. And when you look at it from that perspective, it can completely change your understanding of what the relationship with God is.
Well,
I know that with just any human relationship, if it's a forced, it's not a real relationship if one person feels forced into the relationship.
Well, I was just hearing from some psychologist about kids, and it's talking about like discipline in kids, and saying that as a parent, I forget the exact wording, but pretty soon you're going to have no control over them, and they don't have to choose to be in your life anymore. Like that's the message with kids. It's like pretty soon they're out there, and you can't, no matter what, you can't force them to come back. So you don't mess this up in the time when they do have to be around you, or they're never going to call you. But if you do it right, they'll be on your show with you.
Yeah, the one if you do it right. The one thing I'll note is with that idea of a relationship is beautiful, because it doesn't start off as a 100% completely trusting relationship. You have to build that trust. You have to turn to God, see him acting in your life. One of my favorite passages in the Word is, I think it's Daniel, I forget which, one prophet says, hey, wait a minute, where are all these really great things that we've heard of from our fathers, about God? We're not seeing any of those. And the reality is that as we grow, we need to see God operating in our life to build that trust, and at the same time build that relationship.
I think that's why we have life, right? That's why you go through, when you just start like right next to God, it's like you don't know God. Like you got to slowly through life. It first is like an idea, that maybe there's God. Someone told me that there is. Slowly it becomes real, and then there's still a long way to like, actually, I love God. I love what God stands for, what he's trying to do. A lot of people are wondering, like, why are you so into Swedenborg's writings? And I think it was our friend David Moffat, who has another Swedenborgian YouTube channel, who he said, I love the God that Swedenborg presents, like the picture of God that Swedenborg presents. Right. I love that. And I think that's part of why I like Swedenborg so much, is that the God, you're always looking for like, okay, where does he give this picture of a God who is like arrogant or inconsistent or illogical? But it's like, no, it's like, I could love that. I love that.
Yeah. I want to call out that Mike Weber said in the chat, my Calvinist friends think God does 100% of the work and we do 0%. Swedenborg says we've got to cooperate. And so, it's just a very different thing than thinking we in one sense, God is the doer of everything, but there has to be some willingness on our part, and as of ourselves, make our own efforts is the way to consent to it. And so we have to have a part, right?
Well, what I've heard you say a couple times, Karen, is that the word real. And that's where I go with this as well, is that it has to be a two-way in order for it to be a real relationship, because God could have programmed us to be like robots. We always do the right things. We say the right things, and we love God. We worship and all these things. And that would have been all bogus, because he would know that this isn't real. Yeah. Years ago, my son, he's like 6, 7 years old at the time, and he wanted a dog. And I did not. I did not want a dog. And he very much did. And I said, well, how about we'll go up to Target. They have this little robot dog I can buy you. It'll be really cool. It's got a remote control and all this stuff. So it'll do all the tricks. And you know what? The boy says to me, he says, Dad, that's not real. I want a real dog. And I'm like, but no, he does all the things that a dog will do. Said, no. And it's like, he is right. And that's the way I think about free will with us. It's a two-way street because God wants it to be real.
Yeah.
And so the 6-year-old boy knew it.
Yeah. Trying to give him a robot dog is the kind of thing that once he's out of your control, he's like, I'm never going back, Dad. You tried to give me that robot. No, but it must be, who is it? Some Christian philosophers like, Aquinas or something, this must be the best of all possible worlds because it's the world that God made. It must be, if the Lord's divine providence has for its end a heaven from the human race, if the point of it is heaven, and heaven is this freely chosen real relationship, that's better than a universe in which there's no evil, but it's all robot dogs. You know, it's all robot dogs. Yeah. So by definition, like that's good. That's better. That real relationship is better.
Well, it shows you the value of reality, right? Isn't that what it's saying? That, you know, that's what God values, something that's it's real. And fantasy, you know, believing that somebody loves you when they actually don't is not as valuable as the real.
That's right.
So
Well said. Susan Ferrara is getting us into the next part of our discussion, because she's saying, does anybody else experience that when you try to get closer to God, things seem to get worse? I still know that he's there, though.
Look, people, hey man,
No.
our thunder is cool. This is right, and this was when we were like sitting down to try to research this as well. It's like, oh, there's so many different ways that you can spin this. So so there's another possible way that this can feel. So yeah.
Yes. Let's go to
yeah, you know,
There's
a quote in there about this, and I saw that one, and I thought, oh, I can't wait to talk about that quote, because yes, Howard and I have a shared bond of trauma around getting closer to God and making our lives worse.
Like we made a huge mistake. Which one are you talking about?
Just the second one.
That you're talking about 330?
No, the SH 840. Feeling inner turmoil is a part of the process of getting closer.
Yeah. So this is a classic. It says, as long as our trials continue, we think the Lord is absent, since evil demons disturb us, sometimes to the point where despair almost prevents us from believing God exists at all. But the Lord is closer then than we can possibly believe. When the trouble ends, we find comfort, and then we first believe the Lord is present. And I'll just preface, I'll just tack on there that these trials he's talking about, he says, are essential to spiritual growth. Like you cannot grow closer to God without going through this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and let's talk about why. One of the things Swedenborg says about this is we start out, we got this ego, right? And there are a lot of lower level spirits attached to our ego and kind of running our impulses, that start out pretty self-absorbed, and we can't help that.
No offense.
But as soon as we're starting to want to try to turn towards God, there's those things are not comfortable. Like when you start to learn, you gotta consider your neighbor as much as yourself. That's like starting some turmoil with our lower ego and the spirits that are connected to that. So there's some turmoil and some no, wait a second. And so that's why, starting to open a sense of conscience for something higher than yourself or something outside of yourself starts to stir up this turmoil. So it's actually a good thing, has to happen, but it feels tumultuous as that, back and forth gets started.
But Karen, You don't know my neighbor.
Oh,
my neighbor isn't worthy of anything.
There's exceptions. There are exceptions to these.
There's this process that we go through when we make that decision to draw closer to God or want God to be a greater part of our lives. And that is, again, it goes back to the very first part of our conversation, where it's about an alignment and a mutual relationship. And with that alignment comes a need to understand the true nature of God so that you can align your life with Him. And that is painful. It's painful because He says, well, if you want to align your life with mine, you have to look at your life and look at it honestly. And that can be pretty painful when we recognize that, hey, the bar's up here and I'm out of the picture.
yeah.
I thought I was pretty in shape, but now we're trying to run. What did you say? More than a mile?
Yeah.
Well, Matthew Bush wrote, "Pushback always happens with change."
Yeah.
I once heard from a psychologist. It says when you try to break out of a system, and he was talking about systems in your mind, you always get the opposition's best stuff when you try to break out. And also even with like he was saying with like dysfunctional, if there's like a family member who's kind of like you're stuck in some dysfunctional thing and you try to change and they'll hit you with the best stuff in a bad situation. So same thing, but it's also like, oh man, I want to go up to Mount Everest. I want to start post grad school. Anything that's like hard and good is like, oh, you got to work to get into that.
Yeah. No, well, and that's a nice, what I was thinking about was going to theological school. Oh my gosh, here I am on this quest to study the writings, study Swedenborg, get closer to God, all this stuff. And I think that I'm a halfway decent human being. And then I start studying all this stuff and I go, oh no, my wife was right. I'm a jerk. I'm a terrible person.
Now I tell her she was right. But yeah, also, you know what, and this is something that people on this panel will understand. If you go online and start telling everyone about Swedenborg stuff, and you're like, oh, this is how you're supposed to be, and this is how God is, then the next day when you're not doing what you said to do, you're like, oh no, now I got to do this. Now I actually have to live by this because it's on record, and I don't want to be one of those guys that's all telling people be good, and then I go home and I'm mad at the dog. Look, it's not good. It's not good.
No names, but Todd and I will tell a story. When we were in theological school, we would have a weekly visit, maybe a monthly visit from some older, wiser, oftentimes retired ministers. And one came to us. I mean, he was a guy, he's passed since, but he was a guy who everybody thought he was truly an angel on earth as a minister. And he came home one day from work, and there was a letter on his dresser from his wife. And it talked about how absolutely great he was and how everybody loved him. And then it said, but we don't see that at home. Wow. And to hear that from him, the man who remained nameless, and see the humility that brought on him was powerful.
It would have been painful. We were talking about it can be painful.
No, but it's like everything for me comes back to the Muppet Christmas Carol. Have you guys seen Muppet Christmas Carol?
100 times.
Okay, it's okay. Obviously best piece of cinema in history. And so there's a part at which, and I'm sure the other versions of the Christmas Carol have this, but it's the Christmas present, and Ebenezer Scrooge really starts to warm up to the Christmas present ghost. He like finally gets it. It's like, oh, I get it. There is some love and he's jolly. And then there's this part at the end of it where the ghost of Christmas present is showing him this party of people who are mocking him and saying what a terrible person he's been. And then he goes and shows, and it's just hitting Scrooge really hard. And then he goes and shows him Tiny Tim and how sick Tiny Tim is. And Scrooge is like, oh no, is he going to die? We can't bear it. And the ghost of Christmas present quotes Scrooge's own words back at him. And he's like, well, if he's going to die, he'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. It's just like this twist of the knife in his heart. But at that point, he's got to hit bottom here. It's not done out of meanness. It's like, you've got to, I just was going over a script for the next podcast we're going to do about, the trials all the way to despair. You've got to hit bottom with that, because that's the only way to free you from that. That's the way God is going to free you from that hell that you're in.
Yeah. Sometime the real mirror is Dorian Gray.
What's that? Who's Dorian Gray?
You don't know the story of Dorian Gray?
I don't think so.
So Dorian Gray goes ahead and has this painting, old story. He has a painting made of him that has magical powers, that he will never age, but his painting will show all of his horribleness and all of his evil as he grows older.
There you go.
And it's a pretty great story.
All right.
That kind of gets us, doesn't it, to True Christianity 330, just because what we're talking about is,
sure, but
Swedenborg would call them evils that are in the way.
Now, Stuart's behind the scenes. No one knows he's here.
Okay.
Stuart, go to TC 330. Here we go. This is another one. Yeah. Okay. This is our part in the process of this two-way process. I have stated that the more we abstain from what is evil, the more we will and intend what is good, because evil and good are opposites. Evil comes from hell and good comes from heaven. Therefore, the more hell, that is evil, is removed, the closer we get to heaven, the more we focus on, and the more we focus on good. So I think it's like, people are like, well, why can't God just be close, without understanding that God is goodness and the opposite of God is evil? So if you had, Swedenborg talks about this so many times in so many ways. If you had a bunch of wolves living in a pen, you couldn't put sheep in there. They're opposite from each other. So this is why repentance and regeneration are so important. You got to remove this stuff that's anti-God, and then as God draws closer from that, it focuses your mind on what's good. Like that's a sign that you're getting closer to God, is more often there is a focus on good, or you notice that.
Yeah, and think of the Ebenezer Scrooge story.
Let's bring it back in. Let's watch the whole movie right now.
Just cut to the movie. A realization is the first step to removing the evils. And so you were describing in these scenes, like he's hit with the painful realization of what a jerk he's been and how self-centered. But that's the first step of having that removed. You know, he's seeing the ugliness of it, so he wants to let that go. And then what flows in, this is the wonderful thing, that we don't have to like manufacture goodness. If we just get rid of that negative stuff that's in the way, the evil, the divine is just ready to flow that in. And just like Scrooge's heart was filled with something better when he stopped that.
You think he's going back and like, I wish that spirits thing had never happened. He loves it. He's so happy. The Christmas morning, he's all about it.
I think of first do no harm. Let's start there.
Yeah.
And when you look at the 10 Commandments, there's a lot of thou shalt nots. That means those are the easy things to identify.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm a liar. I can acknowledge that, and that's right there. Don't do it.
Right.
Penny Frick said, "We get so used to thinking we have to go through this life all alone." And it got me thinking, because it's like you can hear us all talking about like you got to be good, you got to not be bad. Why? Is because God like was trying to make you feel better. He's trying to make you feel better, and it's like we're in a very artificial state where you feel like you're an isolated creature that sort of is on its own in existence. That's not how the human mind was made to run. Like it really is running software it can't really run on its hardware. So doing this stuff, getting closer to God, gets you to the natural state, which is knowing I'm going through life with my giant friend that makes life. Why do you think? Why is life so weird and unpleasant? Is because we're living it. It's not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I like Elaine Luster's comment. Sometimes I feel like in my walk with God is helping me learn to trust him because I have trust issues. So there she's just recognizing that she has trust issues, lack of trust. That's one of the things we have to get past. And so it's a good realization. That's part of the walk with God, to realize trust issues. They got to learn to trust.
I think most sermons really boil down to trust God, right? Trust God, do what he says, trust him, love him. I mean, there's only like 3 sermons that really exist, and it clearly says that trust is an issue. But I agree with Howard. Like, you see all these 10 commandments and stuff that says, don't do these things, and it can be very discouraging to see kind of the negative side of religion, because it feels like, oh, we'll stop doing this, stop doing that. I like doing those things, and we don't want to do those things, and yet we do. And I think this is the trouble we come into, is that we often forget, and we're perhaps unwilling to admit, that we actually enjoy these evils that we engage in. And therefore that it's hard to get rid of it. So when you see Swedenborg saying, look, you've got to do this first. I had the worst doctor
at one point. It was, I went in there and because I was having all these health symptoms, and this doctor was like, stop eating so much sugar. You start exercise. Like, it was just like terrible. Like all these things I did not want to do. You know, obviously evil, judgmental, terrible doctor. So I'm out. I was out of there. You know, I went and found
absolutely as you should be.
I'm just saying, like, it's love. It's just love. Like, or for like, I wanted to get into I wanted to be a professional basketball player, but I went to this guy and he's like, you're gonna have to run every day. Okay, will you hate me? You know,
come
like,
on, that's ridiculous.
It's love. It is love. Okay, so let's now this, I want to get into this next one. This True Christianity 68 is a little bit longer, but I think this is a detail of the process of drawing close to God that I think, I don't know if I really have seen this in anywhere except Swedenborg, but this is that it hinted at it in the first one, which is like, yes, God, you need the help of the divine to do things, but you also have to act like there is no God. I mean, like, act like it's all you while acknowledging that it's all God, which is this like funny, almost oxymoron, but Swedenborg says is absolutely essential to this process. It's the key. This is the sports medicine. Just True Christianity 68. To God, the totality of heaven is like one human being. On the other hand, hell is like one giant monster. Going against one evil and its falsity is going against that whole giant monster of hell. No one can do it except God, because he is omnipotent. Clearly then, unless we seek help from God Almighty, we have no more power of our own against evil and falsity than a fish has against the ocean. And I just want to say, you never think of a fish fighting the ocean. And like, it's like, yep, that's it. Or a gnat against a whale, or a piece of dust against a mountain that is falling on it. Not just a mountain, but it's like a mountain is already falling on you. On our own, the power we have against evil is much smaller than the power a locust has against an elephant, or a fly against a camel. Furthermore, our power against evil and falsity is even weaker because we are born into evil. Evil cannot act against itself. It's like, no, but I already like that stuff. Therefore, we have to follow the divine design in the way we live. We have to acknowledge God, his omnipotence, and our resulting safety from hell, and do our part to fight against the evil that is with us. This acknowledgement and this fighting go together as part of the divine design. Otherwise, we cannot help being plunged into hell and swallowed up. And once there, we cannot help being driven by evils one after the other, like a little rowboat on the sea being pushed around by the storms. So I want to just return for 1 second to that sentence that's like, therefore, we have to follow the divine design in the way we live. We have to acknowledge God, his omnipotence, and our resulting safety from hell, and do our part to fight this. So it's like, okay, guess what? We're safe. We're good. Like, God has all the power. He exists. We're safe from hell. And then also you still got to do your part though, which is fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah.
One way I try to get a feel for this is, you know how there's such a strong, well, if we just go to the exercise mode, or I'll go to cleaning the bathrooms because I don't like cleaning the bathrooms.
Let's get
and
to
every week it's coming up to the day I clean the bathrooms, and I every week do not want to do it. So don't want to do it. But I have learned that if I just start to do it, I get this new energy, and I'm actually like, this isn't so bad. And I kind of enjoy it, you know, I kind of get into it. And I just feel like that's just this little analogy of like, there's this God energy that does everything. But if we're sitting on the couch and not making the start, it can't flow or something. And so our effort is what gets it flowing. Yeah. And also that's our choice. Like, you know, we're making a choice to make that first step, that effort, you know, get off the couch and start running. And then it's not so bad. I mean, that as you thought when you're sitting on the couch and didn't want to do it. Or so that just gives me this little feel like it's really an energy beyond myself that takes over once I get started, but I have to start. So that's just one way I kind of try to wrap my head around our part. It's such a small beginning, just start, and then this energy flows. So that helps me a little bit with that.
I've had the same experience with any kind of cleaning.
Yeah.
It's like but when you before you're doing it, hell is like telling you, like giving its propaganda. Like you're gonna hate this. It's gonna be stupid.
Do it
it's
later.
Gonna be overwhelming. Do it
Don't.
later. And as soon as you start, you're like, I feel great right now.
Yeah.
I feel great right now. Yeah. Hey, I want to hear your thoughts on this, Howard and Todd. But before we get to that, Jennifer Lynn Roberts Wilson, thank you for the super chat, $10. Thank you for supporting the not-for-profit Swedenborg Foundation. We are very grateful. Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for supporting the Curtis channel.
Do you guys want to say anything more about TC68?
I just always been fascinated by it because I agree with you. You started to say that it's almost an oxymoron. I think of it as two truths that actually can't be held in the mind at the same time. And if I can think of it as a very natural analogy, I think of it as like a balance beam or a slack line. You can get it, you can balance it for like a moment, and then you're off. And then you're back to thinking all about yourself, or back to saying, oh no, it's all in God's hands. But
that's great.
It's that fun moment of balance that, the golden mean, I think is what they call it.
I know that feeling of not being able to stay on the slack line very well. Yeah, it's true. For a second you're there and you're like, how could you ever stay here? But you get a little glimpse of it.
Yeah. My comment on that quote is more about the analogy, like, the fish against the ocean, the gnat against the whale, the piece of dust against the mountain. That's what always stuck out to me on that one, because it just felt like it's okay to feel overwhelmed by the evil at times. Sometimes I just feel like the hell is having its day with me, and I can't even imagine not being this way. I can't imagine being a nice person at times. And it's like, oh, you know what? I could actually get rid of this if I actually just realized my place in this battleground. I am not the mountain. I'm the piece of dust the mountain is falling and crushing on. And that actually the only way to beat that is to call on for help. And that's really what got me into ministry in the first place, is that realization and actually reading the scriptures and participating in that, getting closer to God that way. But to see that analogy, just again, to really put the point on where I am in this whole scheme of things. Like, oh yeah, actually, no, I am a piece of dust.
Yeah. Like the funny thing is, like, humility is joy and freedom. Humility is joy and freedom. That was what Swedenborg had to find. He had this, you could see in his journal of dreams, where he went from being a very successful, very full of himself, to this intense humbling process where he was going through all this stuff that he's talking about here. He writes about for himself. He's like, I just constantly, night after night, thinking about, like, save me, I'm such a sinner. But just like Scrooge, he wouldn't have gone back and, like, I never had my spiritual awakening. That I would rather have still been working on the soul's domain or the animal economy of the animal kingdom or whatever he's working on, because it led him to way greater happiness, and that only comes with a certain kind of humility. So it's like it's all for your own. The intent of the universe is for people to be happy in the state of heaven. So anything that's done is to get you there.
Yes, and we'll be reading about that in our.
We're going to get, but first we got to say Darby Delane, thank you, $9.99 super chat. Thank you so much. And then Catherine, just a super chat as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to just add on a little to what Todd said. I think part of the process too, there's so many nuances to this process, right? And one of them is realizing how powerless we are against the whole forces of negativity, and hellishness, evil, however you want to phrase it. And there have been moments, and I know this is sort of about one of the things in AA, that process, and getting to a point where you realize when it's just an emotion, a negative emotion that, like, I've been so clear sometimes, like, there is no way I can do anything about this emotion. Like, it is absolutely this negative emotion. And I need to turn to the Lord and ask for help with it. And there've just been some times where it's just been miraculous, like, when I was feeling a real irritation towards someone, and I just could see so clearly, like, I know that's wrong. I feel powerless to change that feeling. And I just asked the Lord for help. And in just a short while, like, I felt my feeling about that person changing. It was like a miracle. It was just this little experience to show me, yeah, the Lord can change your feelings if we're willing, and do the point of resisting the. Anyway,
Well, you could
I
only,
couldn't do it myself.
You can't until you've had the experience of struggling with that feeling for a long time,
Yeah.
and not being able to change it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that first. You have to have that.
Yeah.
I know, same thing with like thoughts and like, I cannot figure this out. I cannot get myself out of this.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that all the way till you're like, I just can't do it. And then you can feel or perceive God doing something, because you can tell this was not something I could do. I know I could not do this for a long time. Now it's happening. And it was after I was like asking for help with this, that's when it doesn't force you to believe it, but you can sort of see, oh, this is the operation. Is the operation of the divine. Hey, we got another super chat. Thanks.
Oh, Chinonye.
Chinonye. Yeah, I don't want to say that wrong, but
I don't know if I'm saying it right. But thank you so much.
cool. Let's get to some more fresh content. Okay, so another one of the signs of getting closer to God is that you're going to have more wisdom. So there's good signs too. You get more wisdom or more perspective. This is Divine Providence 34. The more closely we are united to the Lord, the wiser we become. Since there are 3 levels of life in us from creation, and therefore from birth, there are quite specifically 3 levels of wisdom in us as well. It is these levels that are opened for us in proportion to our union. They are opened in proportion to our love, that is, since love is union itself.
I like how you use that word perspective, because I think that's how we can relate to this idea of wisdom. As you just get further into life and through all the experiences you've had and the struggles and everything, like your perspective gets deeper, and that is, you're getting closer to the Lord. So your trust in the bigger picture, your perspective on the temporary versus the long term. You're just getting wiser, meaning it's a gift from God, but you're just seeing a little bit more what matters, what doesn't matter in a deeper.
I've been saying that to Howard for years, that I'm way wiser and that he should be listening to what I'm saying.
Young punks like Howard, Hey, Todd, I was going to say something nice about you. Todd did mention earlier that when we went to theological school, and we both went later in life. We both had lives and careers and marriages before we went to theological school, or when we went to theological school. And I remember years before that, I'd had an unpleasant business interaction with another individual. And for whatever reason, for years after that, I guess it happened in the springtime or the summertime, because every time I mowed this one corner of my garden, I thought of this guy and what he had done. And the feeling like never went away. I always felt that way. And then one time when I was in theological school, I think we were talking about looking for evidence, signs within our own lives where the God has been working with us. And I went, if God's been working with me and I'm not the same person I was 10 or 15 years ago, maybe this guy isn't either.
Love it.
And I never felt that way about him again.
Yeah. Exactly.
We've been friends ever since.
Yeah, that was Todd, wasn't it?
No, he doesn't return my calls.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
Great example.
And it's funny how something about getting acquainted with the nuances of how God works with people, it works with you, makes you more aware of what it is to be a human being, and which unlocks these sort of common sense things about other human beings and what they must be going. It's just like what you were saying, Howard. Of course. Oh yeah, right. It's just it's artificial to think of a person as frozen in time in that action, but somehow like taking the journey of spirituality can unlock those kind of perspectives in a really powerful way.
Yeah. Some of you in the chat are sharing some of your particular struggles, and it's great to realize, I mean, as you go through life, you can always look back 10 years and think it's not as much of a struggle. So hang in there. God is working with you, and we'll keep you going towards a bigger perspective.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat was saying, what's off the left? I mean, we have a video about it. It's basically from a part of Swedenborg's books, Heaven and Hell, where there's like a covering off the left eye is like a symbol of spiritual sight. Also, there was somebody named Satan in the chat who wrote, I think he got banned or muted, which was like, keep sinning, I'm gonna win in the end. It's on brand. It's on brand. It's like come in there and just like say something that's totally useless.
You know, the reality is devils are an awful lot more subtle than that.
Yeah, that's true. No, it wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't be. Yeah. If you think this is a sin, you're like way far ahead. It'd be more like, what are you talking about? Like this is just good. Hey, Greg Ruland gifted 5 off the left eye memberships. Hey, people snap them up. Thanks, Greg. You just brought a bunch of people into our family.
I just didn't know you could do that.
Woo-hoo.
Fancy dancy, YouTube.
We learn something new every day. All right, so another good thing that you get from drawing closer to God is you get more inner contentment and happiness, which again, I was thinking in the Lord of the Rings when Gandalf is like, I'm not trying to rob you, I'm trying to help you. That's what God is trying, like all these like, here's things you should do, shouldn't do. It's all to get you more of this contentment and happiness. Like that's the intent. That's the intent of the divine for each human being. So there's not ulterior motives. It's not about, we need to get you subservient, or we need to get you to fall in line. We need you to just do what needs to be done to get you to this contentment and happiness. This divine providence, 37 and 41. Oh yeah.
What are you doing with this Lord of the Rings thing? What about A Christmas Carol? I mean,
no. I mean the book.
Scrooge is content and happy after he's come around, and I just kind of thought you went off into left field with this Lord of the. I was lost.
When I was talking about the Christmas Carol, every time I say Scrooge, I have to try not to say Swedenborg, because I think of Michael Caine as like Scrooge. I picture like that's probably what Swedenborg was like when he turns good, So it's like, my loyalty to that movie. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but I let Tolkien get a word in edgewise, But thank you for keeping me honest on that. This is Divine Providence 37.
Curtis. Sorry, I gotta step in here just for a second. Occasionally, I will get some people commenting on my channel from the standpoint of, all this stuff is made up. It's it's useless. It's people's desire to control other people, and all I can think of is, but you know what? A lot of made up stories also tell some really great moral lessons.
Yeah.
Like so
like that's the floor. Like that's the floor. And so if it's true, it's so like what do you got against made up stuff? The more closely we are united to the Lord, the happier we become. This happiness is rarely evident in the world, though. Because in this world, we are in an earthly state. Not never, but just rarely. And things on the earthly level do not communicate directly with things on the spiritual level. They communicate only by correspondence. This kind of communication is felt only as a quiet peace of spirit, especially after struggles against our evils. However, once we leave this earthly state and come into a spiritual state, which happens when we depart from this world, a happiness gradually emerges that is beyond description. 401k.
Yeah.
Put your money in the 401k, emotional 401k.
Yeah, I feel two things come to me from that quote. One is the promise that there is this amazing upgrade in happiness waiting for us, when we shed the earthly level, the earthly body, the physical body. But also in there is pointing out that you can feel some of this. It's way more subtle than what you will feel after death. But this is evident in we've talked before about studies that show that people, as they are, it's calling.
Yeah.
Is that on your
Some,
computer? Oh, is it,
yeah. That's me.
Oh,
put them on.
okay. Studies show that as people get older, their happiness increase. Not everybody, but the happiness tends to increase as life goes on. Even though the
Yes.
body's deteriorating, there's more limitations. There's more, you're sort of losing your your looks and your abilities and everything. But there's a growing contentment and acceptance of life that happens more in later life. And I think that is, part of this growing, that it's not about, because you're able to appreciate the better things in life. Maybe you can't, you're done trying to climb the ladder in your career or trying to look amazing or whatever. And you're realizing what matters more and noticing, having more gratitude, things like that. Again, that's a choice to notice those things, but it's just, I've read lots of studies that show that contentment can increase as life goes on. And I think that's, Swedenborg indicates that you can feel that. It's more subtle than after death, but you can feel some of that here.
I'm 40.
Yeah.
I turned 40, and I like 40 way better than 30,
Mhm.
and I like 30 way better than 20.
Yeah, and just wait till you're in your 60s.
Oh, baby. I think about, as I get older, I'm like, this is awesome. I also think about I think about heaven. I think about heaven as like all around me, and I'm just sitting here, and there's like only so much more rock to like bore through before you, like, heaven's like sitting right there, because I'm getting older and older, so it's coming. So like, I can do this for a little while longer. So it's like being old. I love being old, man. I love getting old.
Early in Heaven and Hell, Swedenborg talks about the joys of this natural life, and that they seem like amazing. And the joys of a spiritual life seem really subtle. But he says in heaven, it's completely reversed. Anything that approaches a natural joy is barely noticeable. And the truly spiritual heavenly joys are fantastic. I love that
Yeah.
flip-flop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of, we recently somewhere had some discussion about the benefits of old age. And one of the things is, as your body gets older, you can't enjoy the physical pleasures as much in various ways.
It's like, I gotta try these like other stuff out, like the joy of love.
Which is God helping you to kind of let go of those, and start to open your heart to things that are deeper and eternal and things like that. So yeah, like Howard was said, it can start to flip a little bit, even in this world, and our deteriorating bodies help us. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're in the home stretch here. I got one more. It's a very short quote, but I think a profound thought, and a pretty distinctly Swedenborgian thought, as far as I know. It's about how there's more clarity about who we are and who we're not as we approach God. This is one benefit you get. So it's Divine Providence 42. The more closely we are united to the Lord, the more clearly we seem to have our own identity. And yet, the more obvious it is to us that we belong to the Lord. Another one of these seeming paradoxes. How's that strike everybody? Let's see, some people say you fade off into, like, you merge with a oneness and then you're gone, or you just become part of this. Like, no. The closer you get to God, the more that you're you, but yet it's more and more obvious that you belong to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of those quotes. I'm just gonna have to wait to the next life to sort that out, because I dare not say he's wrong, and yet it's so hard on my small brain to comprehend that, and yet, there's every now and again I think I get a glimpse of it that says that you're on the way, you're making progress, and it just becomes more undeniable that I am that grain of dust and God's everything, and yet He's given me that sense that I can do something. I look around my life and go, oh, look at the things that I've done. And I go, oh yeah, but I've done those. But what's God's given me the talents, the abilities, and all the stuff to do that. But I've done something. So it's just part of my brain.
I feel like the way in which maybe I've been on that slack line, like stayed on that slack line for a second. So I'll use that forever. Actually, Howard, I'm going to tell people I came up with that. That's great.
Yeah. All yours. It's your channel.
It is like I could picture it a few times when I've been feeling like pretty spiritual. Like I feel like I can really kind of feel perceptibly the reality of God exists, and especially if I'm really reading a lot of Swedenborg and just feeling like this is just hitting really hard. I'm in heaven with this stuff. It's really good, and see some of the goodness of that. I had it like when I went to California last weekend to give a talk, and I was like as like a lot of flying, and I was giving a talk about Swedenborg, and like I was in a different time zone, and I generally I'd rather just stay home and do nothing, and I'm not so I was anxious about it and stuff. But then I was reading some Doctrine of Life, and it was just really hitting hard about it. The 10 Commandments are like a summary of the entirety of theology, and that's the reason why it just was so straightforward and rational. I was like, this is awesome. This is such great stuff. And then I had this feeling. I was just like, wow, God is really, He's got it going on. And then I remembered I can go totally nail this talk. I remembered okay, I can contribute to this. Even somehow those two things went together. I can bring everything I got and will into this thing. That was kind of this balance of I'm God's everything, but yet you get this sense of okay, well, here's what He's given me, and I'm going for it.
Yeah, I can relate to that very much. Something that your dad and I were recently talking about, how you, hey Dad, out there. Well, I'm going to start with this.
My dad's out there get a real job.
Yeah.
Get a real job.
Something that really helped me with this concept was we were
kidding.
researching.
I'm sorry, but I like to. So my dad, who's never on the show, he's moderating the chat right now. I love to just I don't know, I like to malign his character like that because he's so not like that. He's so nice. He's been so supportive of everything I've done. So I like to sort of cast him as what is this off the left? I would just go and get a job, a real job. So sorry, Dad.
Well, we were researching for a show that ended up being called The Angels and Evil Spirits with Us. And
Classic.
I got a technicality out of the research we were doing that helped me with this concept. And that was that especially in our unregenerate state, the Lord is governing us through angels and spirits. Mostly the spirits are near us, right? Because we're far from that divine order. And so it's the guidance is having to come through this whole network of angels and spirits. And the more we regenerate, the less, we're moving up in the network. We're letting, we don't have to be governed through those lower spirits anymore, or those middle spirits. And it's getting to be less and less a network and more just you and God, approaching more just that direct connection. And I could really picture then, because we don't realize how much the thoughts and feelings are coming through spirits near us. It's not really us, and the more you're getting closer to God, here we are, this is what we're talking about, right? The more you're yourself, because the more you're becoming the direct creation that God created here as you're reaching that higher potential, that deeper self, instead of being this thing that's influenced by all these other spirits and angels.
It's like,
So you're getting more to be the real you. That,
like if you're a teenager and it's like, oh, you obviously like you got your fashion from this person,
Yeah.
then you just kind of like get older and you're like, all right, I don't do any of that.
Yeah.
Obviously gave up on fashion. But
right.
Yeah.
And what John and I were noticing recently, he's approaching retirement, and I'm I'm not going to retire soon, but just we noticed as we're getting older, we're more and more feeling like where we fit in to the work world. Maybe when you're younger, you feel like, oh, I ought to be able to do this better, or think you can do this better than you can. And it's sort of more this wonderful combination of humbleness, of realizing better what you're not very good at, and more confidence in what you are good at, meaning, that gift from God, that how you are of value to the effort. And there's a peacefulness in that. And it does feel like becoming more yourself,
Yeah.
instead of, I don't know, all sorts of illusions.
Karin, I think we spend a lot of time being ourselves, which isn't really actually that good. But I think what you're talking about is becoming the you that God intends you to be.
Yes.
And,
Right.
And I think that's where that balance is in that passage from Divine Providence.
Right.
How can I feel more like me, and at the same time, I belong completely to God? Well, that's because I'm becoming the me that God intends me to be.
Yes.
Not the other me, the one that loves myself and only cares about what I can get out of life.
Yeah. Well said.
If you look at, that's a great point. If you look at people who are really good at something in their field, like really good, like a musician or something, or a athlete, and you like ask them like, how'd you get so good? And they'll always be like, well, I had this great coach, or I had this great teacher, or I looked up to this other athlete and they taught me all this stuff. Like they're indebted to people, and they'll get, it's almost like the better they get, the more they acknowledge how they're indebted to people. I think it can be like that us with God. Like we can be a really, really great version of ourselves and be like, oh man, but no, like everything that's mine. Like he taught me that. Like I didn't even know how to dribble. He taught me that. So.
Yeah. And it's also reminding me of this intriguing thing that Swedenborg was saying in a few numbers in the spiritual diary, his journal of spiritual experiences, that when I finally became something like, when I finally became nothing, when I became nothing to myself, I started for the first time to become something. So it was like a shedding of an old self. And then there was this new him, self in the like good sense, the self that the Lord created started to emerge, which is just so exciting.
Just like in the Muppet Christmas Carol when I don't know which part. Hey, Curtis Evans just gave us a $25 super chat.
Thank you.
And says that how we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life. James T. Kirk. Thank you. Hey,
Star
you know
Trek.
what? Like it's like we're at the end of the hour. What I would love to do before we go is have both of our guests just tell people where they can find you and what you're up to on YouTube and elsewhere. So Todd, what are you up to these days?
Well, I'm in the process of moving, as you know, but so I'm a little bit of a video creation break. But my channel on YouTube is Lord I'm Trying. It's on YouTube, and Instagram is usually where you'll find it. I think I have TikTok running sporadically as well. But I try to do some short videos about biblical symbolism, saying this is what Swedenborg says. All this stuff in the Bible means, water, it means about truth, and wine, well, it means a higher truth, like wisdom. So we get all these things, try to make sense of the Bible, which I think Swedenborg does a great job of. And I am trying to bring that to you in an easy to understand way. So that's
a great channel. Go check it out. Subscribe. Howard, what about you?
So I'm not moving. I'm enjoying my time here in Australia, even though I don't sound like Australia. And I've got a channel. My channel started in COVID. It started in COVID just because people couldn't come to church for a period of time. So I started doing services online, a recorded service. And that has now become a weekly 5 or 6 minute summary of my talk. And I called it Spiritual Shorts. It's a misnomer because YouTube says shorts are less than 60 seconds. But you can find me. Sadly, there are lots of things on YouTube called Spiritual Shorts. But if you search Spiritual Shorts and you see a little red pair of surfing shorts, that's me.
Yeah, we'll link to both you guys in the description
Good.
if we haven't already. Be
Yes.
sure to go check out Howard's channel and subscribe as well. We got to support our Swedenborgian creators online. Thanks to both of you for making the time to hang out here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Curtis. It's been great.
Thanks,
And
Karin,
thanks,
for
and thanks
coming
to everybody
through.
who was in that chat over there.
Thanks, chat.
Yeah.
We love you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who
everybody.
is
Much
watching
appreciated.
after the fact, and we'll see y'all very soon. New videos out all the time on here. See ya.
Here's everybody.
Bye.